How long?
We will be speaking for about 15, 20 minutes is our goal, usually going up to about 30. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Darshan Talks live stream. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. As you may know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you have a think about drugs, you wonder about medical devices, you obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. This is the live stream for you. I should clarify, I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I am a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. And my guest is an HR professional, but is not your HR professional. So this is neither legal advice, nor clinical advice, nor nor HR advice. For that, you'd have to reach out to each one of us and actually get us on and hire us. I do these live streams because they're a lot of fun, and I find myself learning something new each time. But it's always wonderful to know when someone's actually listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. If you want to ask our guest questions, please send in messages. We'd love to actually hear them. And if you actually like it at the end of it, please share the video. Just to clarify, these are all considerations. They don't necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the guest or their employers. So if you want to reach me, you can always find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Our guest today is going to be talking a little bit about a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is hopefully a combination of leadership and burnout, and how do those two things interact with each other. So if you care about the issues of burnout, and that's something we've actually had to deal with before, we're hopefully going to talk a little bit about that. Our guest today is is a career human resource executive and is an independent HR consultant. I've known him for almost a year at this point, because I've been part of the group for about a year at this point, and he has always been a wealth of HR knowledge. So our guest for today, David Howe. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Darshan. Really happy to be here.
Oh, excited to have you. So David, the reason we're having this conversation is because we started sharing a couple of links. And one of the things that popped out is this link I saw about pharmacists now having a place where they can say, these are the problems we're facing. These are the reasons we are struggling, and we're seeing this issue of job dissatisfaction, and I'm seeing them personally. The neighborhood pharmacies are closing up. Some of them are actually limiting limiting their hours, and I'm seeing real effects on businesses due to burnout, and real effects on people due to burnout. Could you talk a little bit about what is burnout? Is it really burnout, or are there ways to sort of empathize, sympathize, and address it before you reach the level of burnout? And we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. And I've noticed the same thing. Our pharmacy's reduced its hours very recently, and I know that they're bringing people in from other pharmacies and trying to share talent across them. So there's a lot going on there. And through the pandemic, I think we went through a phase where we were kind of in crisis. This was last year, right? Where, so you rise to the challenge, you do what you need to do, you go above and beyond. And what we're in now is a crisis, or a sense of crisis, that's gone into sort of marathon length. You can rise to a crisis for a period of time, but if it feels like it's never going to end, that becomes a different story. And we see people in all sorts of industries, including pharmacies, deciding that they don't want to do that anymore. And people talk about the Great Resignation, and people who were furloughed from their jobs but don't want to go back, or people who were commuting but no longer are willing to do that. So I think this is part of something that's overall in our society, but particularly acute in this profession. As employers, we really need to think about how do we operate differently in a way that's going to be more conducive to our employees having satisfaction, having balance, feeling secure, and feeling cared for.
Which sounds great in principle, right? I mean, I like to think that most employers aren't going, how do I actively sabotage my employees? On the other hand, I remember when I worked in a pharmacy, one of the dream roles would have been, can I work from home? Well, telecommuting and telehealth is a real thing now. we're still seeing issues of burnout. So is it that employees are now expecting more, or is it that employers are pushing employees, whether pharmacy or anything else, actually, too hard when they're at work?
I think it's both. I think that people have gotten a taste of what their life can be like that's different. And if that means that you're able to work from home, that may be something that you'd like to do much more. You take the example of people working in the restaurant business and in hot kitchens and weird hours that conflict with the, stuff that they want to do in their personal lives and things like that. People got a taste of life without that, and they don't want to go back. And so you translate that to what people experience in a pharmacy, where you're, in a location doing the pharmacy business over, a long shift. That may not be something that people want to do as much. And at the same time, given the pandemic, the pressures in the health industries are higher than they've ever been. And, you're interacting with patients, if you're in the pharmacy, patients who by definition are probably on the sicker side of things, on an ongoing basis, wearing a mask for your shift. And it's not as pleasant as it used to be, potentially. So I do think that people are being pushed harder, and I also think that they've gotten a taste of life that's different. And maybe if they were off work for a period of time, they explored doing something else and got very interested in that. So it's not necessarily dissatisfaction all the time. It may be they've had an opportunity to be with their kids or to explore a different interest that leads them in a different career direction.
So that's really the question, right? So it used to be that if you paid enough money, people will say, yeah, you know what, it works out and I'm willing to do it. But are we seeing a generational shift where they're saying, no, it's not about the money anymore. It's about my work-life balance. And you see, I always heard about work-life balance as something the US strived towards, but Europe really did better in many ways.
Yeah.
Are we seeing a dramatic shift in that in reality? Now the US, the Generation Z, if you will, for lack of a better term, is kind of going, no, it's not something we aspire to. We expect it now.
Yes, and I think there is a generational shift, but I don't think it's limited to the younger generation, right? I think the younger generation is maybe emblematic of what a lot of different people are feeling, and that includes me, for example. So I was working in a large corporation up until February of 2020, and working 60, 70-hour weeks, and now I'm doing independent consulting. And I'm not working 60 and 70-hour weeks. I'm busy and doing important work and contributing, but it is a different lifestyle, and I would not want to go back. And I'm our generation or whatever. So So there's one other thing as well that I think people are looking for, which is meaning in their work.
Yeah.
And I think pharmacy can be a very meaningful career and vocation. You're making sure that people are getting the medicine that they need and helping them with their health. I think it's important to make sure that we tap into that meaning in engaging people in their work, and make sure that their experience is one where they see the connection to the benefits that they're giving to other people, and the improved health that they're giving to other people. Because it can easily turn into feeling like a sweatshop kind of a situation, right? And so we've got to have a way of making sure that strand is connected.
It's a really interesting point you raise, because probably about 15 years ago, the first drive-through pharmacy opened up, and I remember distinctly because I was working as a pharmacist, and pharmacists had this sense of, I work at McDonald's. I literally work at a drive-through.
Yeah.
And there's always been this general dissatisfaction of I'm working as a pharmacist, but all I'm really doing is licking, sticking, counting, pouring. I'm not actually getting to engage with patients. I'm not really getting to make I went to school for 6 years. It wasn't a lick, stick, count, pour. But here's my question. As a business, you're trying to bring in as much revenue as possible. How do you balance the need for revenue and meeting your next quarter's results with the need for the individual job satisfaction and what is just a necessary element of the job?
Well, I guess I would ask, how are you doing meeting your business results when you're not open on Saturdays and Sundays now? If you don't have enough employees, then those business results aren't going to be where you need them to be either. So, I reflect as to sort of what we've done during the course of this pandemic as a society, or even the companies that I'm consulting to. In that crisis time when we were in second quarter, third quarter of last year, I think we focused a lot on, providing kind of wellness guidance, making sure that people had access to an employee assistance program if they needed to get connected to a mental health professional. We kind of approached people with, here's a set of options and it's kind of up to you, tap into them if you'd like to do that.
Right.
Which I think is a good thing to do. And paying attention to that, one of my clients did a really, really good job of creating a Wellness Wednesday series, and they would bring people in with different aspects of wellness. It could be financial, it could be health, nutrition, exercise, things like that.
Yeah.
Give guidance to their employees. Great thing to do. Great thing to do. I think we're now at a point where we got to go beyond that in the current environment and make sure that our business practices and our management practices are also more nurturing maybe than they've been before. So help employees understand that they're really valuable, be open to what their needs and pressures are, be empathetic, meet with them to check in and see how they're doing beyond just what we need to be doing for work and what's your assignment and what's your shift, but really help them understand that they're valued and be connected with them in a different way. And that's different than the company saying we're going to do a Wellness Wednesday or we're going to have an EAP program. It is working into the way you manage people, actual direct caring.
So that sounds great in principle, but here's what I'm really hearing. I'm hearing that you need to second quarter last year, third quarter last year, fourth quarter last year. We heard, like you said, maybe not Wellness Wednesday, but the equivalent thereof. A lot of people saying we care about you and having programs, which is great as a concept. But how much of that is lip service compared to what you're talking about, which is we need to go beyond that? Should we have been beyond that years before? And I don't mean like as a result of COVID, but as a result of just us pushing employees to go far beyond what their comfort levels were. And then the second sort of counterbalance to that is, how do you balance the privacy of an individual going, yes, you need help, let me give you help. Well, I don't want you to be in my business. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. Well, I think really great employers were doing these things before. So it's always been a good idea to check in with your employees. It's always been a good idea to care about them as people. And that's what I've tried to do in, when I've led teams and managed people before, well before the pandemic. The other thing beyond the pandemic to keep in mind is the amount of trauma that people have been through in the last 2 years. So we've had racial reckonings and, George Floyd and protests. We had the most divisive presidential election in history last year. We've had natural disasters at an unprecedented rate. Like people are hurting, and they're dealing with all sorts of stuff outside of work that maybe they've always had to deal with, but are maybe at a more acute level. And all of that impacts them in the midst of this then health crisis that we have. So while it's always been a really good practice, it's almost becoming an indispensable practice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people want to work for organizations and managers that care for them. So moving to your second question there, yes, you can tip the balance too far, right? So I think the point and the guidance is to be open to and willing to listen and really truly be present for the amount that your employees interested to share, right? And not to push them into an uncomfortable position beyond which they are, that they don't want to open up. But by creating an open space, and then when the employee shares whatever it is, by reacting well to that, which means truly being present and not distracted, truly listening and expressing that you hear them, and then offering whatever assistance you can, then the next time they'll open up more, right? So you don't just barge in and like we had one relationship yesterday and we're going to have a totally different relationship today. People don't work that way. But it's a process that you go through, and then each person has their own threshold of comfort. I've managed employees who were really, really private, and that's got to be okay too. And I've managed people who wanted to share things with me that I really didn't want to hear, to be quite honest. You have to kind of meet people where they are, and then the manager and the employee both have to have the boundaries and the limits that they operate within that you're comfortable with, because otherwise you're not going to be truly genuine, and it's not going to be a real relationship. So there are certainly things that if you get into conversations about that could create risk for the organization or you as an individual or whatever. So you've got to have some common sense about what's reasonable for you to be discussing in a work setting, but it's broader than it used to be. That's for
right.
sure.
Right. So if you're building a program though, and you're doing this, and you've done this at massive scale, what you're talking about is almost an individualized level of understanding what each individual employee would needs. Do they need that privacy, or do they need do they need some more handholding to sort of get them past these initial stages of I hate to use the word trauma, but the initial stages of whatever's going through their lives right now. My question to you, from a program development standpoint, how do you train managers to be able to respond to all of this while still being good managers in their technical field of expertise? So I'm thinking of your IT person, your average IT person, and now I think of them as generally being more introverted. They want to do their own thing. They're happy, and that's a broad generalization. But let's assume that that's the average IT person, for argument's sake. But now you're asking them to now talk to each of their coworkers and sort of, how do you deal with that?
Well, so that's, I think, where the company or the organization can help, right? So we need to provide management skills and interpersonal skills training to people, and also set the expectations with them and provide modeling, right? Show them what it can look like in practice. So, when I was in my corporate world, I had responsibility for leadership development at a big company.
Yeah.
And we were working on how to train our leaders and our managers to be stronger in all sorts of aspects, this aspect being one of those things. And certainly within a big corporation, you've got people who, your sort of quintessential marketing and sales people, more comfortable in this environment. Research people and IT people maybe a little bit less. So you've got to differentiate and identify who's got the need, I guess.
Which is interesting, and I'm gonna show a bias of mine, which is I struggle with soft skills, and I struggle with soft skills because I sometimes feel like I'm not being genuine. I'm not being who I am. How do you advise managers to connect with these soft skills in a way that they don't tune themselves out? If that question makes sense.
Yeah. So this is, sort of an experience that I've had as well. If you look at my personality type, I'm much more of a thinker than a feeler, for example, for anybody that's familiar with Myers-Briggs. And I've had to work at, I've always been somebody who cares about other people. I think most of us are people who care about other people. But I've had to lean into that over time because it's not the natural place for me to go. It's not, if I've got only so much time with somebody, like I want to get the work done. I want to make the decisions, and I want to, hash through pros and cons of things and stuff like that. So, but what I've found is by spending the time on the soft stuff, it opens up the dialogue on the hard stuff, or whatever you want to call the other things. So that may not answer your question in terms of how to get there, other than to say, we're all humans. Like, open up your humanity a little bit, share a little bit about what's going on with you, maybe as a start. So if you find it difficult, like, lean in that way, and that then invites the other person to join in the conversation.
Please continue.
I was in a session on diversity, equity, and inclusion earlier this week, and the woman that was running that session used a model that I think might be helpful to what you're talking about.
Okay.
And she was coming at this in the terms, or in the context of conversations of race, which are really difficult for us to have, but it could apply in this instance as well. And she was saying the way that we as people take in and process information is usually through one of four quadrants or channels or whatever. So one is intellectual, right? Problem solving and thinking. A second is emotional. What are my feelings? How am I reacting to this? A third is moral. What's right and wrong? What do I believe in? And the fourth is social. What do I feel I need to do about this? And her point there was not just academic. Think about those four things. But when you're interacting with somebody, understand which of those four they're coming from and get in that quadrant with them, even if it's not the way you would come at the issue from. Right? So if you're in a conversation with an employee about the pressures of having kids at home who can't go to school, or they're worried about their kids who aren't vaccinated yet, or whatever, right? And they're coming at that from an emotional point of view, get in and empathize with them, or share how you're feeling emotionally about the impact of COVID. Or if they're all, I was going to say up in arms, that's unfair. If they're in a zone of saying, something's not right, vaccine mandates not right, I really disagree with it, they're in their moral zone, and you don't have to agree with their point of view, but get in the zone with them and interact with them in that same zone. Don't stay in your intellectual zone, which is what I do, but get in the zone with them, and then you relate to each other in a different way. You don't have to agree, but at least you're talking the same language, or the same part of how the mind is thinking.
I want to poke at that a little bit more, because it's a fascinating model. I've never heard of it before, and it's a very interesting way of thinking. But let's just pick on the vaccine hesitancy that you raised. What would be the moral equivalent of I think I shouldn't be forced to get the vaccine? How do you have a discussion at a moral level on that? I guess I'm trying to understand what morality means here, and how you engage in that.
No, it's in the area of, like, beliefs about what's right and wrong, right?
Okay.
So it's don't overemphasize the word moral too much, but it's belief systems. And so the person who's saying that, if I got yours correct, their belief system is, nobody should be telling me what to do with my body. My body, it's my choice. And particularly big government shouldn't be telling me what to do. Right. And then so you come in and you say, okay, I understand that. On the flip side, isn't there a moral obligation to be protective of other people? And
okay.
Right? And so if you decide, or a bunch of people decide not to get vaccinated because they don't want somebody telling them what to do, they also can create a risk for other people. And what's the moral?
Okay, but that's not social.
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm maybe I'm confusing social then. What would have been a social question there, and what would have been the social response, just as way of example for the same issue?
So the social quadrant really is about doing and acting. So what am
Okay.
I going to go do? Am I going to, we all ought to write our congressman, or we all ought to,
Ah,
go to the school board and protest,
got it.
right? It's
Okay.
about the doing, the next step, the what's, and what we're talking about here is a very highly charged issue. And
Yeah.
I am not suggesting that you try to get into a debate about
No.
lack of hesitancy with your employees,
Correct.
because the, it's not the model isn't about trying to get into a debate. The model is in trying to understand where the other person's coming from
Yeah.
and meet them and acknowledge where they're coming from, which may be in a space that's different from how you are thinking about or reacting to the situation.
Yeah.
So the example, in the race example, for example, maybe this is risky too, but if somebody's in the emotional part of that, and you're in the intellectual part of that, the conversation by definition is not going to go well, because
Okay.
you've got to understand the deep feelings that the other person has. So,
Yeah.
so the two examples here are really, really heavy examples. And what I'm suggesting is just keep it in your mind when you're interacting in a workspace with your employee. Keep in mind, like, where are they at on whatever topic you're talking about?
Yeah.
Meet them in their quadrant, and then they'll feel more heard and understood.
It's a really interesting model. I already feel like I know what you're going to answer for one of the questions I'm going to ask you at the end.
Maybe.
Maybe. This is such a good one. So let me ask you one question, which, as you know, I usually aim for about 15, 20 minutes, but I'm already at 27. So I'm going to ask you one last question, which theoretically we might get into the next time you come on, and hopefully you'll agree to come on again. But the question I have is, if you do these things right, if you manage to meet your employees' goals, is this the bare minimum, or are you now setting them up for success?
I don't know how to answer that question. The way I'm coming at the conversation is around, people's engagement in
Yeah.
their jobs, right? And engagement in terms of, like, do they still want to do this work, right? And are
Yeah.
they going to put their all into it, or are they going to put the bare minimum in, just to fill the hours and get paid?
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about here is not, I wouldn't call it the bare minimum. I think it's a significant action or approach that the organization needs to help promote and train people how to do. And I do think that it will help with the growth and development of the employees, but it can also help them just do their current job in a way where they feel more appreciated and feel important. Everybody wants to be acknowledged and feel like what they're doing is important.
Yeah.
And so this would be a good approach, irrespective of whether you think somebody's going to be the head of your pharmacy, or whether somebody's going to be a great frontline, health coach for people.
Sure. Absolutely. Wonderful. And again, such a wealth of information. We could keep going. I have like a series of questions I could get into, but we're well past our timeline. As you know, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. My first question, what would you like to ask the audience?
What I'd like to ask the audience is, what are you seeing in terms of burnout and maybe disaffection in your pharmacy colleagues?
Yeah.
What are you seeing, and what do you think would help?
I usually try to answer these just as an initial thought. Hopefully other people will jump in eventually as well. I think in general, I'm seeing a higher level of dissatisfaction than we've seen before. I'm also seeing that since people are resigning, more work is being put on the people who are staying back, which makes them even more dissatisfied, which means that they want to leave as well.
Yeah.
So whether that's pharmacy, whether that's anything else, we're seeing that overall happening. I think I think I'm not seeing that just in the pharmacy area, though. I'm seeing that in most other fields. That I do a lot of work, as you know, in clinical research, and I'm seeing a mass exodus there. So that's really interesting to me as well. I know, for example, I have a lot of people in the promotion field and the advertising field, and they're just going, we'll hire a lot of people right now. We're expanding, we're growing, and we can't find people to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
So I find that to be a really interesting situation
happening in human resources. Like their HR people are in huge demand. It's
exactly
definitely a candidates market right now.
Very much so. Next question. What is something you've learned in the last month?
Well, so this model, I learned that this week. So that's I think what I'm going to share with everybody today. I hope that was a helpful one. I found it to be like really insightful.
I agree. I thought it was a really, really fun model. So thank you for sharing that. Last question. Well, second to last question. What is something that made you happy in the last week?
Well, I'll mention two things. So one is we have had a patio put in behind our house, and it was supposed to be completed in the spring, but with all of the supply chain challenges, the bricks and the various things, like different components, weren't available. So that's been completed in the summer, and then we have a lot of landscaping around it, but you couldn't put those plants in 95-degree heat. It wasn't a good idea. So we have just had our landscaping completed, and it now looks great. So I'm very happy about that. Although of course, anytime you do something like that, now we've found that we had to bring in an electrician because the lighting that was installed, there was a problem with the outlet, blah, blah, blah. So always, when you do this, it opens up other things. But I'm really happy that we've got that outdoor space now. And then the second thing is we're going to see both of our college-age kids this weekend. So that's something that will make me happy in 2 days.
Oh, that is so cool. I love it. I love both of those two things because I'm in the middle of trying to figure out how to improve my living space as well. So it's always good to know when something gets finished because I'm in the middle of that and I'm just struggling. It just looks daunting. Yeah. From the college-age kids' perspective, I have to imagine that's both wonderful that they're coming back, but you can't wait for them to be gone at the end of it so you can have your privacy back as well.
This is a get-together on my wife's side of the family. We're going down to DC, so everybody's coming in there. And we've got sort of a run of show setup of different places we're eating and different activities we're doing, and then everybody will go back to where they came from.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Last question. I've asked this before, but how can people reach you?
Sure. Well, you've got the email showing there. It's davidchowe@comcast.net. So feel free to drop me a line, and I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. David, this was amazing. Thank you again for coming on. I hope you'll consider coming on again.
Great. I will. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun.